愁是一碗水，乡愁是一杯酒，乡愁是一朵云，乡愁是一生情。年深外境又无尽，日久他乡近故乡。
In early September, Xinya village begins to hum. The mathematics teacher, Ye Yichu, welcomes the new students on behalf of Xinya Primary School. At Wenchang Pavilion, students are greeted by the first writing ceremony, a 600-year-old tradition. The highlight of the ceremony is the reading of encouraging learning by the first imperial scholar, Ye Yuanxi.
Work hard with honor.
Work hard with honor.
Read the classics.
Read the classics.
Rise above the world.
Rise above the world.
Be extraordinary.
Be extraordinary.
The noble families that live within the village are known for being studious. They have made it a point to pass down the tradition of valuing education. In 800 years, the Ye family in Yuhua has grown, 3,000 family members in over 36 generations. Their family instruction is that farming brings wealth, while learning makes one cultured. During Emperor Ningzong's rule in the Song Dynasty, the Song and Jin were always in conflict, forcing the royal family of the Song Dynasty to move south to Zhejiang. A scholar named Ye Kun arrived at Mount Yuhua in Zhejiang to develop the land. It took his descendants 200 years to finish his task. While they were doing this, they came to believe that farming would bring them wealth. Eventually, someone would change the course of the Ye family history.
He was a person of virtue. That's how I describe him. I mean, in my opinion, he was a sensible man, and reasonable too. That's how you should carry yourself. The Yuan Dynasty was established when he was 29. He didn't pass the imperial examination. At that time, he had had enough. He didn't want to take any more examinations, so he ran a school which he named Chongle Academy.
In the early years of the Yuan Dynasty, the Confucianist Jin Liu Xiang and a group of scholars were invited by Ye Kecheng to hold a grand first writing ceremony for new students at the foot of Mount Daofang. Ye Kecheng was a third-generation member of the Ye family, and he was worried about his family's education. So he set up an academy for the village, even if there were only 50 villagers. Jin Liu Xiang, who was well-versed in geomancy, advised him to choose another place to ensure Xinya village's prosperity in learning.
The village is built on the side of a mountain that is known as our ancestral mountain, Mount Yuhua. And the opposite this is Mount Daofang. Reflected in water, Mount Yuhua looks like an inkstone while Mount Daofang looks like a brush head. Together they form an image of a brush dipped in ink. This has been described by geomancers as a safe place for one's descendants to prosper throughout the years.
Because he believed in geomantic omens, Jin Liu Shang built a semicircular pond at the center of the village, hoping all its residents would pass the civil examinations. Xinya village seemed to have the right climate and geographical position. But from the Yuan Dynasty to the Ming Dynasty, no one passed the imperial exams. Villagers grew suspicious of the geomantic omens. Ye Kechang's grandson, Sir Baya, failed 7 imperial exams, causing the villagers to suspect even more. Instead of giving in to pressure, Sir Baya convinced them to build a tower instead.
This tower stands straight like a brush. It's named Tuayun Tower. In Chuangzi, it is said that the bird itself flies aloft, a great wind, to a height of 90,000 li. This statement greatly encourages civilians, namely our descendants, to have the idea that they must be positive while learning, so they may rise above the world, carrying the God's blessings.
The 7-level ancient tower made of black bricks is more than 30 meters high. It seemed to make up for the geomantic omens and symbolized Sir Baya's purpose in learning. He went into seclusion at the foot of Mount Baya after he failed the exams. He soon realized he had forgotten his true purpose in learning and chose to pursue a scholarly life. The tower could reach the clouds, but it would be as steady as Mount Tai as it was deeply rooted in the earth. It was with that in mind that he wrote the chapter encouraging reading.
He said learning was the noblest way to make a living. This means in our lives, learning becomes the most noble kind of work we'll ever do. Teaching our families the ways of learning. This asks the implicit question, how can we teach them, our families, and our descendants, to study hard? How are they to learn that? You can be a minister or prime minister. It means you can be a high official if you will study well. Minister and prime minister are high posts. You will stand out as a scholar.
Instead of striving for high-ranking posts, try to be outstanding scholars. Sir Baya advises his descendants not to forget the original purpose of learning, which is to pursue a scholarly life. At the same time, scholars must not show off their knowledge. Instead, they should hide their abilities as one hides a sharp sword in its sheath. Professor Peng Lin of Tsinghua University agrees with this.
Confucius tells us that the scholars we had in the past studied for themselves, but the current ones only studied in order to show off. So this tells us that the sages mainly read books to satisfy their spirit.
Behaving oneself begins with learning. Learning begins with reading books. In the early years of the Qing Dynasty, Xinya villagers were earning through farming, but they still had no concept of teaching morality. With the family's support, private schools were set up in the village, including Meiyue's study room and Huaer Hall. In the 32nd year of Emperor Guangxu's rule, the imperial examination system was abolished. It was only then that the culture of learning blossomed. The government funded the first official school, Jujing School, now known as Xinya Primary School.
Flying away or flying back?
Flying away!
At the beginning of the 20th century, the Ye family prioritized educating their descendants. They even used their ancestral hall as a school. The once solemn Xishan Ancestral Hall was now open to eager students like Ye Jianong.
This is the library.
The library?
Yes.
What about this one, Wan Chui Hall?
The hall is for school meetings. We stood in rows when teachers made speeches and requests. These 3 consecutive rooms are classrooms. This one, the opposite room, is for teachers. Next to it is another classroom.
Which classroom did you study in?
That was my room in grade 1.
That one, over there?
Yes, that's right.
Learning is the noblest of human pursuits. At the age of 6, Ye Jianong seemed to already understand the meaning behind this statement. To make sure that the children would have a clean path to walk on, the villagers raised money to pave the way to school with bluestones. After they have made their New Year's Day offerings, villagers hand out steamed buns to young scholars in Yoshu Hall, 4 for primary school graduates, 8 for middle school graduates, and 16 for college graduates.
In the past, was there any reward for imperial scholars, the excellent students, or maybe those who did well in school?
Before we had a rule to award a first-degree scholar with 36 kilos of rice.
That's a huge reward.
Yes, it was. 24 kilos for a tribute student. And then 48 kilos for an imperial scholar.
In the past, villagers awarded noble scholars with valuable rice. Families took pride every time someone passed the imperial exams, sparking healthy competition among all 11 families. When someone passed an imperial exam, his family would set drumstones and horsestones in front of his ancestral hall. If there was an imperial scholar, a flagpole would be erected with a rice box on top, symbolizing profound learning. With the tradition of encouraging learning gaining ground, the first news of success was finally sent to Rongsho Hall.
News of success. Ye Yuanxi was the 37th imperial scholar in the imperial exam in Zhejiang in the 49th year of the sexagenary cycle.
Yes.
Mr. Ye Yuanxi
Took the imperial exam in Zhejiang province. That is equal to the provincial entrance examination now. After he passed the exam, he was awarded with a plaque. This was also sent here. We had an imperial scholar. All the villagers came and began to beat the gongs and the drums.
At his family's urging, Ye Yuanxi went to the capital for the metropolitan examination. He passed, ranked 80th among level 3 scholars. He summarized what he learned from the whole experience in Encouraging Learning, which he wrote for his descendants. He mentions that all their hard work would be wasted if they fear exams like he once did. While examining a topic, one should look for its core meaning and consider it alongside the teachings of the sages. When Ye Jianong was young, he memorized Encouraging Learning. Armed with its wisdom, he was hastened along the path of self-realization. Today, the Shinya Village Committee has replaced steamed buns and rice with red envelopes to award students who go to college. These are given to them in Yoshu Hall. It was in this same hall that Ye Jianong received the first scholarship in the village when he was admitted to the Department of Chemistry at East China Normal University in 1982.
Outside Yoshu Hall is the General Ancestral Hall. Looking at these plaques, we see our ancestors' attention to talent. Look, many are for generals, civil officials, and scholars. For all students in literature, martial arts, or science, plaques would be hung to recognize their achievements and to inspire their descendants to learn from them, to catch up to them, and ultimately surpass them.
In the history of Shinya Village, there have been hundreds of first-degree scholars, tribute, and certified students, but only one imperial scholar. In recent years, there have been only 300 college students. Out of the 3,000 villagers, however, more than 500 are pursuing education. Ye Jianong and other graduates are also teachers. They believe teaching brings honor to one's ancestors, and learning develops descendants' morals. Schools are the spiritual sustenance of scholars. Books are food for their minds. The habit of reading in Shinya Village has come a long way, from the collection pavilion in Jujing School to the library in Huashan Primary School and the rural library in Wenchang Pavilion.
How often do you come here in a week?
Twice or thrice.
What do you read?
Novels and comics.
Novels and comics.
Yes, like the novels of Bing Qin.
On weekends, the rural library in Shinya village is always crowded with devoted readers. 23 years ago, the library in Wenchang Pavilion was rarely visited because of its small collection of books and its hard-to-reach location. Traveling far to read was a luxury at that time. It was then that a retired town leader who was enthusiastic about education came to Ye Yin-chang.
Back then, I remember he told me an old truth about scholars, that they should be respected. I agreed with him. I used to love reading in the village. I told him, go ahead, do it. And that's when it all started.
The former town leader's name was Yi Zhaoping. He had little education, but he knew the importance of reading. With the help of 5 retired teachers, he decided to reopen Xinye Library. Determined to collect 10,000 books, Yi Yin-chang, then cultural commissioner, decided to gather books from everywhere.
We only had a few books. I thought, what can I do? I came up with an idea. I wrote proposals.
Proposals?
Yes, I gave 1 copy to every student and teacher who came here to read. I made several copies too, and I sent these out afterwards. I sent these to retired teachers and also to veteran officials who had left the village. I gave them to everyone.
Ye Yin-chang sent out more than 300 proposals. Books arrived from across the country, including Hangzhou, Shanghai, and Wenzhou. This gave him hope. To thank them for their kindness, Yi Yin-chang placed the names of the donors on the back of the books they donated.
This one's from Yeze from Wenzhou. It was donated by a child named Yeze from Wenzhou.
Yes,
This is from Tianwei.
yes, Tianwei is a retired worker. I helped out in writing hundreds of names, especially the books from children. I wrote their names with so much gusto. When the children borrow these books, they are encouraged. When they find out they have the same books at home, then I will have more books here in my collection in the future.
After 15 years of hard work, Yi Yin-chang fulfilled the former town leader's wish. There are now more than 12,000 books in the library, and over 300 villagers come here regularly. The library has also attracted many readers from 20 villages in Jiande City and Lanxi City. Some even travel many kilometers on mountain roads just to come here. The library is now the most popular place for students to spend their spare time. It's also a good place for village elders to come and read.
Tofu! Tofu! Tofu!
82-year-old Ye Zhaorong and his wife Liu Sai-chin run the village's only tofu shop. He has been doing this for over 50 years. Since he was young, he has understood that farming can feed him, but reading enriches his mind.
I believe it's bad to be illiterate. At my old age, I observed that scholars lived a good life, and apart from that, they dressed well. I had to sell tofu, but I would try any kind of work too. Now, after work, or the minute I'm done selling tofu around the village, I would go to school right away in order to study.
To make ends meet, Ye Zhaorong would make tofu every day at the age of 14 while studying. Every morning, he would grind the beans with brute force like an ox. When the students did their morning exercises, he sold tofu and would rush to school before 8. For 4 years, this was how he got by just to get an education. Ye Zhaorong was born in Hanmo Hall. The tradition of learning began with his grandfather, Ye Su-shi, who was later called Mr. Origin.
My grandfather?
Yes.
This is my
Oh,
grandfather.
this one.
Yes,
Sir Su-shi.
that's what he was called.
Those were words of praise for him.
These are comments about him. A hardworking man and a role model in governing a family, fair to his 5 daughters-in-law.
His descendants praised him for bringing up his sons well and for being a good family leader. Early in the 20th century, Ye Shi was inspired by Mr. Sun Yat-sen's idea of creating opportunities that would enable poor children to study. Ye Shi came up with an idea of putting up a night school.
He always gathered the children together. He read to them. At the time, my grandfather was just a teenager. Even so, he would call a number of children over, maybe around 30. They would do work in the village, like chopping firewood or farming during the day. It became routine, but at night, they came to this room to study. He would let them study history, like the ancient Chinese civilization, and he would include other lessons. For instance, the 3-character classic and other literary books. This is where they kept them.
The old book cabinet.
Yes, the book cabinet. It had a door that closed over it. Carved on it are the characters for Hanmo Hall.
Ye Shi turned his 3 rooms into classrooms and named it Hanmo Hall. He worked in the daytime and taught the children at night. He taught them the 3-character classic, the popular collection of traditional aphorisms, and calligraphy. His second son would often skip his calligraphy lessons, and when he found out his son was smoking instead of studying, he punished him in class.
He didn't care that my grandpa was his son. He grabbed him, then after that, he pulled Grandpa's hair just like this and pushed him against the stove. It was on. Smoke was rising from it at that time. Yes, he said, "What's wrong? Didn't you want to smoke, huh? Go ahead, smoke as much as you want."
I bet he never smoked again.
Yes, and he was choking.
His eyebrows were burnt
Right,
after
his
that.
eyebrows were burnt.
That must have hurt.
Right.
A man must be morally upright before he can teach others. Ye Shi punished his own son in public for acting foolishly, while the other students were focused on calligraphy and reading. From 1916 to 1949, Hanmo Hall influenced many generations of scholars in Shinya village. 60 years later, villagers still teach students to read and write here, while learning about Mr. Origin.
This is how people live and make sense of their lives as long as one was taught to be morally upright. One will succeed in everything. And on the other hand, if there isn't any moral guidance at school or in the family, nothing will happen. The person will achieve nothing.
On the barrel, look, this character means Sue. And then over here, we have the character she.
Oh yes, I see it.
Yes, so it reads Sushi.
That's his name?
Yes, he wrote it himself.
This is really good handwriting.
Yes, I agree.
One must be honest and practice upright 4-square handwriting. As his handwriting suggests, Ye Shi was a morally upright man. As a child, his great-grandson Ye Shunfu was obsessed with his great-grandfather and his handwriting. He would often refer to his great-grandfather's copybook. When he isn't making tofu, he practices calligraphy and has been doing so for 40 years now.
They look old. Were these from your childhood?
Yes, I wrote them when I was a child. I practiced whenever I was free. This is the holy precepts. I wrote them all myself and used a lot of paper. This is Wang Shiji's holy precepts.
I don't think this is paper for writing.
No, it's paper for worshipping my great-grandfather on tomb sweeping day. We couldn't afford writing paper before.
Oh, you
We
couldn't?
However hard his life was, Ye Jiaorong never stopped his children's education. He supported his family of 7 by making tofu at the age of 50. Ye Jiaorong would grind beans all day, once making 60 kilos. All so he could afford his children's education and writing materials. With the tofu shop, he was able to send 3 to middle school and 2 to high school.
To change our lives, we must pay great attention to education. We will be no better than animals if we stop reading and learning for as little as 3 years.
Without learning, one cannot achieve wisdom. Without ambition, one cannot finish one's education. It took Ye Shanfu 40 years to perfect his handwriting, which he wrote about in the 116-volume Collection of Farming and Studying in Hanmo Hall. Like his great-grandfather, Ye Shanfu also teaches children calligraphy. To make them write well quickly, he invented the clock practicing method. In the spirit of calligraphy, all villagers who can read and write attend a grand celebration on the third day of the third month. Today, there is a traditional celebration in Xinye village. It originated from a poetry gathering held by Ye Kecheng, where scholars recited poems, made couplets, and competed in calligraphy. Villagers select the person with the best calligraphy skills and assign him with the task of representing the Ye family. Hundreds of people skilled in calligraphy come from all over. As usual, they feel great pressure to do well in this competition because no one has beaten Ye Zhaozhong for the past 12 years.
I heard people will vote in this competition.
Yes,
The best one will be selected.
that's right.
But what do you select the best for?
Well, he has to write the couplets every third day of the third month.
Couplets?
Yes, we write couplets on the hall of our ancestors.
Couplets for the ancestral
Yes,
hall?
yes, that is correct. And the best one is assigned to write the couplets.
Is there any rule for writing those? What does the person have to do?
Well, we use the ones written by our ancestors.
The Ye family ancestors wrote 131 couplets of instructions on education for their descendants. Today, Ye Zhaozhong is victorious once again. The villagers have entrusted him with the responsibility of writing hundreds of couplets on the columns of all the ancestral halls. They reflect their ancestors' wisdom and their belief that the tradition of learning and being virtuous must be handed down for generations so that the Ye family will develop in good order.